And so if we take this as a kind of case study, let's say it's someone that finds himself scrolling social media, they maybe get lost in it, it's a very unconscious habit that they've built where an hour goes past and they don't know where the hour went and they didn't even want to do that or they didn't feel like they wanted to do that. What's is step one awareness? Is it becoming aware of the problem first?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think there's so many, it's so it's like an onion. There's so many different layers to this that it could be. If I was working with someone and they presented as that was sort of, something they were struggling with, which commonly happens, again, my first step would be help them understand the model, where it comes from. So, that's a really important point, is to understand, these three teams and to sort of say, what does this mean to you? Because again, different people will have different interpretations and say, well, I can recognize, my chimp there. Absolutely. This is what it's doing. So really it's working through it in a sort of a step by step with the client. So saying, okay, so this is the symptom, is this sort of scrolling, and then sort of saying, okay, so what does that mean to you when you do that? So again, that's going to be different for different people. So it could be, I've lost an hour, I've not been present for when the children have been at home, I've gone on it and it's made me feel really sad, it's affected my self-esteem. So again, I need to look at it in terms of what effects that is having on that person, because again, that's going to be different for everybody. And then it's again understanding, if we can, where it's come from. Why did it start? Because what we've clearly got is a habit. So a lot of things that people are struggling with is habits. So again, if we come from the chimp's point of view, wants immediate gratification and avoidance of pain, something like the social media and the scrolling absolutely buys into that. Yeah, so the chimp wants immediate gratification, and the thing with sort of the scrolling is that those sort of the shorts, particularly, the chimp can all very quickly get that immediate gratification. Yeah, so your chimp's 5 times faster and stronger. So understanding this is why it's so hard, because it's feeding the chimp, and the chimp go, yeah, more. It's no different, if you like, from the eating drive in a way. So people who struggle to manage their eating habit, one of the things that when I work with people that are struggling with that is explaining, well, it's food, food's a drive. It's not something that you've actually got a lot of control over. Hormones are released to make you feel uncomfortable when you are hungry, to go and seek out food. When you eat, there are different hormones released to make you feel good. So that's why the food drive's really hard to manage. So understanding, first of all, that we've got a situation is hard to manage because we've got a habit. So there's a habit forming in the computer, a computer program, as well as feeding the chimp with, this is going to give you immediate gratification. Yeah.
Yeah. I think also just the modern world is so like overrun with instantly dopaminergic stimuli. So junk food being one, social media, pornography, online gambling, all these things that just weren't available to us when hunter-gatherer times. And I just like, for someone, let's just say that for the case study, the person that's scrolling social media, maybe they've identified that it's an avoidance of pain situation. Maybe they do it when they feel bored. Maybe they feel like the world's, like the reality is just a bit boring because it's not instantly dopaminergic. What's the next step for them? What is it, something practical next for them to do? Is it an exercise? Is it, I don't know, writing something down?
Yeah, so the recording went off slightly during that, so I picked up things, so it's fine. But I think, yeah, again, so what I would do with someone then is anyone, and again, we're going to use social media as an example, but anything that we talk about here, people can transfer to different, sort of habits or things that they're doing that aren't helpful. So if someone's presenting with something that they want to change, then one of the things you can look at is, the triangle of change. So the triangle of change is a really useful tool that I use with my patients in general practice and also in chimp management to help see and help a patient or a client see, can we change a behaviour that's unhelpful? So the triangle of change is, if you literally imagine a triangle, and then on one bit we've got psychological mindedness, which I'll explain in a minute. Then we've got on another corner, I don't know if you call triangles corners, on another one we've got reward or suffering. And then on the other side, we've got motivation and commitment. So in order for someone to change a behaviour, all three areas need to be met. And so that really is psychological mindedness, is that the person recognises that the responsibility to change and manage their mind is with them. So I've had lots of people over the years, obviously a lot of my job is talking about changing unhealthy habits, so stopping smoking and things like that. If someone's saying, well, I'm not going to stop smoking until my partner stops smoking because I live with them, I think we're not going to move ground here. Yeah, because we're not. Then it's looking at the reward or suffering to change. So is the reward to change great enough, and or the suffering you're currently experiencing great enough to change? So you can do work on these as well to sort of sit down and say, well, what is the reward that I'm likely to get if I change the behaviour? What is the suffering with me continuing with this behaviour? And again, those can have work, because initially you might think, oh, no. But actually we'll sit down and really think about it, really think through those. And then motivation versus commitment. So motivation comes from the chimp. It's a feeling. Okay, motivation is great when we've got it, but we can't rely on it. But commitment is about saying, okay, commit to the plan. It doesn't matter what I feel like, but it's about committing to the plan. Okay. But again, even just that, it's about really taking some time to sit down and work out what that plan is. So we often talk about a human-led chimp-friendly plan. The chimp's faster and stronger than we are, so we have to keep the chimp in mind. So if we're coming up with a plan that the chimp doesn't agree with, then we're going to struggle to get that plan to be followed through. You know, we really need to be thinking about, what do I need to make it work? What's going to stop it working? So what are the potential pitfalls? And it's really sitting down and making time to think about this. We've got to consider the chimp's character in all of this as well. So we've got to work with chimp rather than battle with it. Recognizing this is probably a habit now, the scrolling. And again, any habit's very difficult to change. It takes on average, I think, about 60 days to change a habit. Looking, is there perhaps a gremlin? So a gremlin is an unhelpful belief or behavior in the computer that is linked, this behavior, very commonly there is. That can then lead to self-image, for example, being affected. So how you see yourself. So, you know, if there's a gremlin such as, I'm lazy or I'm disorganized, and someone has that self-image, say, well, why not do it? Because I'm lazy and I'm disorganized. So there's loads and loads of layers to it. And it is about working through that sort of, if you like, step by step and slowly. It is about coming up with a plan. The plan is really important, and checking that, the chimp's on board. So part of the plan is, what's essential to make the plan work. Perhaps you can have desirables as well to make it a bit more enjoyable along the way, but it's really having to sit down and go through it, step by step. It's not a quick fix. It's not a quick fix.
Yeah, I think also just like the action of having a plan, the action of being aware of the problem and not relying on motivation or willpower as your sole motivators, I guess, because like if you're only going to do a thing or not do a thing when you're motivated, it's not going to work. It's like exercising. When people maybe look at I don't know, someone that's very healthy or fit and think, oh, it's easy for them if they're really motivated. But it's like, if they
Right.
only worked out when they were motivated, they'd never work out, essentially. And it's the
Yeah.
same thing here.
Absolutely. And motivation's great when it's there. Go with it. It's absolutely, but we just can't rely on it. And that's why, again, it's about making a plan and then committing to the plan and saying, that's the plan. It doesn't matter how I feel. So again, what people can start out with is, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this change. I'm going to get fit, or I'm going to stop my screen time. I'll have loads of time. I'm going to feel great. And the chimp thinks, brilliant. Yeah, I'm going to feel great. This is brilliant. But after sort of, days or, a couple of weeks, that feeling disappears. And that's when the problem hits. So I've worked with people sort of, as I say, sort of struggled with managing their eating habits. And what they'll tend to find is it's like 3 weeks in, that's it, it's gone. Or it's the first time I do a long journey and I have to stop at a service station. So the people know what are the pitfalls, but they haven't planned for them. And that's so important as part of the planning is, well, what are the likely pitfalls? And therefore, what is my plan for those pitfalls? So, again, different example, but working with patients that, are struggling with their weight and need to manage. So snacking, for example, is a common thing. Evening snacking. I've worked really hard all day. I'm tired. I'm going to sit in front of the telly and reward myself with some snacks. So again, we could all say, totally understand it. But actually, well, how do we manage it? Because the problem is that habits become the norm. So to just try and break the habit is really hard. So sometimes it's about, well, let's work with the habit. And instead of buying the healthy snacks, don't buy any unhealthy snacks. Buy in the healthy snacks. Let's do it in stages rather than just say, right, that's it, got to stop snacking. Right, well, let's bring in some healthier options to start with. Then let's actually say, do something different in an evening, because it completely then changes it. But again, all that depends on the person in front of you and what's going to work for them. So a lot of my work is, if you like, walking in someone's shoes with them to say, what's happening for you? Where do you want to get to? And how can we do that with understanding the nature of your chimp?
I think one of the things that's just very interesting, something you said reminded me of it, was not going into a period of change expecting it to either be easy or be quick. And I think if you look at anything that's like, say, worth your time doing, you usually seem to see some sort of reward early on, and then that sort of change or reward plateaus a bit, and then it will maybe be a long time or quite a lot of difficulty to then get to like the big kind of payoff. And I think the thing that comes to mind is, say, like losing weight. A lot of people, let's say, are overweight who then begin to eat healthy. They'll see a very quick change when they start doing it, but then it will plateau as your body kind of gets used to it. And then that's when people maybe, I don't know if you'd say relapse, but then go back to their old ways. And it's the same. What's another example? I mean, this podcast is a good example. See, like podcasting, you see a reward when you first start doing it because it's exciting and you've got the momentum, but then there's going to be a plateau. And this is where I'm at, this very long plateau point, because I know if you look at all the statistics for podcasts, it's always like very, very slow. And then suddenly after years, it'll like pick up. And so it's the same with anything. You'll have the momentum to start with because it's exciting. You're starting something, you're making changes, but it's going to plateau and you need to be prepared for that. It's like being prepared for the pitfalls as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, there's so many different strategies that you can use through the model. But another example that you can use for sort of the example you gave with losing weight or with podcasts is sort of set out, well, this is where I am now. Where do I want to get to? What does that look like? But you can kind of think of that as like being a bit of a flag on top of the mountain. But if you keep looking at where you want to get to, that's just demoralizing. And you've got to say, well, this is where I am. I know where now I want to get to. But now what are the stages? What are those kind of levels at each stage? So instead of keep looking up the mountain, it's the same when athletes get injured. They say, I want to be back to full fitness, but this is where I am. It's so demoralizing. The chimp just think, what's the point? I may as well just go and, give up. But if you can plan it and say, well, actually, the next stage is that's where I'm working to next. right, now I've achieved that. Let me celebrate and reward that, because that's actually also really important as well. And what's the next stage? So you're constantly just looking at that next stage. So you're, if you like, breaking it down, because otherwise it can feel completely overwhelming. And if you overwhelm the chimp, it's just going to, oh, I can't cope. So sometimes it can feel, I often describe it as facing like a brick wall. And that is just too overwhelming for the chimp. Like, where do I start? Whereas if you say, well, actually just take one brick at a time. What's each brick? What's the brick I'm working on now? Where do I go to next? And you don't go further than that. It breaks it down for the chimp. And then, you know, working with the chimp can then get on. I'm motivated for this because I now know, yes, this is doable, this is achievable. So breaking things down for the chimp is much more manageable. Otherwise, yeah, it's just overwhelming. And that's why often I say to the patients, okay, there is a habit, like the late night snacking, that's the habit. So let's work with that habit and do it in stages. First of all, let's make the snacks healthier. Let's look if we can do an alternative, you know, especially now we're going into spring and summer, you know, we're more likely to go, okay, let's go and do half an hour in the garden or something. Suddenly I don't want a snack, I don't need one. So it's different strategies. I think I often say when we're working with clients, we're effectively giving them a toolkit. And that toolkit allows you to use different tools for different problems at different times. So there's not ever one answer or a 5 steps to X, Y, or Z, because everybody's unique and different strategies are going to work at different times.
I think also people in this sort of behavior change fall prey to like all or nothing thinking, and so the person that's going to cut out junk food will think, I can never have junk food again, and
Yes.
it's like, no,
Yeah.
that's not this. That's not quite the solution. Or they'll
Well,
think in terms of, they'll think that they'll maybe conflate instant gratification with just gratification in general, and so they'll never reward themselves or take pride in what they've done or acknowledge what they've done. And if you never acknowledge what you've done, I mean, what's the point? Otherwise, you're just constantly striving, and you're never actually gratifying yourself. There needs to be some gratification.